It is 11:42 p.m. The Persian Gulf in mid-March carries a heat that does not belong to the night, a residual warmth pressed down from above by air that smells of crude oil and salt, and something electric that the older crew members have learned to recognize as the particular atmospheric signature of a region that has been in a state of controlled combustion for 13 days. The water is black and close. The horizon is not a clean line but a suggestion, smeared by haze and the orange glow of the Karg Island terminal burning 17 nautical miles to the northwest, set alight by an airstrike 48 hours ago, and still producing a thermal column that makes the infrared picture in every combat information center in the Gulf look like the sky itself is on fire. The crude oil tanker is 340 meters long and carrying 2.1 million barrels of Iraqi export crude. It departed Basra under escort assignment 14 hours ago. Its destination is the Strait of Hormuz, 180 nautical miles to the southeast. Under normal conditions that have not existed for 13 days, this is an 8-hour transit. Tonight, nothing about this transit is normal. The Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer has been assigned escort duties since the tanker cleared the Shatt al-Arab waterway. It runs 800 meters off the tanker's port beam, its SPY-1D radar painting a picture that extends 200 nautical miles in every direction, and currently shows 43 surface contacts, 11 air tracks, and a layer of electronic emissions from the Iranian coastline that the signals intelligence operators in the destroyer's below-deck spaces have been cataloging for the past 6 hours. The emissions picture has been changing. In the last 90 minutes, it has been changing faster. The commanding officer has been on the bridge for 4 hours. He is a man who has learned to read the electronic environment the way a physician reads a patient's vital signs, not from any single number, but from the trend, the rate of change, the direction things are moving. The direction things are moving tonight is not favorable. At 11:44 p.m., the picture changes. The AN/SPS-67 surface search radar paints 3 new contacts emerging from the shadow of Abu Musa Island, 22 nautical miles to the northeast. The contacts are small, the radar return consistent with fast attack craft in the 15 to 20 meter class. They are moving at 38 knots on a bearing that places them on a direct intercept course with the tanker. The tactical picture updates in real time. 3 contacts become 5, as 2 additional return separate from the island's radar shadow. 5 becomes 7 at 11:46 p.m. The officer of the deck reports the contacts to the commanding officer in a voice that is precise and level and communicates everything necessary in 12 words. The CO does not respond immediately. He is watching the tactical display with the particular stillness of someone who has already run the geometry in his head and is checking his arithmetic against the machines. The arithmetic agrees. The fast attack craft will reach engagement range of the tanker in 16 minutes if they maintain current speed and bearing. And at 11:47 p.m., the destroyer's radio operators transmit warnings on bridge-to-bridge channel 16, the international distress and calling frequency. The transmission goes out in English, in Farsi, and in the maritime safety format prescribed by the international regulations for preventing collisions at sea. It identifies the destroyer by type and mission. It warns the approaching contacts that they are on a collision course with an internationally recognized escort formation operating in international waters. It instructs them to alter course immediately. The transmission is made 3 times over 4 minutes. The contacts do not respond. Their speed does not change. Their bearing does not change. At 11:49 p.m., the 7th contact is joined by an 8th, emerging from a position further northeast that the radar had initially dismissed as a navigation buoy. It is not a navigation buoy. It is moving at 41 knots. The MH-60R Seahawk that has been orbiting at 1,500 feet above the tanker since 10:30 p.m. receives a tasking update from the destroyer's CIC at 11:50 p.m. The lead pilot turns the aircraft northwest and drops to 600 feet, activating the forward-looking infrared camera and the laser rangefinder. The picture that appears on the cockpit display resolves into 8 fast attack craft in a loose wedge formation, their wakes white and sharp against the black Gulf water, each hull generating the thermal signature of engines running at maximum continuous power. The lead pilot calls the contact report to the CIC. His voice is steady. The air crewman beside him is not speaking. He is watching the formation on the infrared display with the focused silence of someone performing a calculation they do not want to complete. At 11:52 p.m., the destroyer's CIC completes a threat assessment that has been building for 11 minutes. The 8 fast attack craft are Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy platforms, a mix of the Siraj and Zulfikar classes, each capable of carrying anti-ship missiles and torpedo systems in addition to their crew-served weapons. The IRGCN has operated in this exact tactical pattern before, a fast, multi-axis swarm designed to overwhelm a single escort vessel by presenting more simultaneous threats than a single ship's fire control system can service before one or more attackers reaches the tanker. The calculation is not new. The IRGCN has been refining this approach for 20 years. Tonight, with Iran absorbing the sustained weight of Operation Epic Fury and its conventional strike assets systematically degraded, the IRGCN fast attack swarm has become one of the few remaining kinetic tools in the adversary's arsenal that the air campaign has not reached. They intend to use it. The commanding officer issues the Maritime warning at 11:53 p.m. The destroyer's signal lamp fires 3 long pulses visible across the water. The 5-inch gun mount trains to bear on the lead contact and holds there, not firing but pointing, the language of the gesture unmistakable across 18 nautical miles of dark water. The CIWS systems on both the destroyer and the tanker come out of standby and enter active tracking mode. On the tanker's bridge, the crew, 23 Filipino and Indian merchant mariners who signed contracts for a transit corridor that looked very different 6 months ago, are instructed to move to the internal muster stations below the waterline. The contacts continue closing. 15 nautical miles. 13. At 11:56 p.m., the formation splits. 4 craft break left and accelerate to 44 knots on a flanking course that will bring them around the tanker's starboard side. 4 continue on the direct approach. The flanking maneuver is precise and pre-planned, the left and right elements timed to arrive simultaneously, forcing the destroyer to choose between covering the primary approach vector and covering the flank, a choice between 2 losses designed by someone who understood that a single ship cannot be in 2 places at once. The Seahawk responds to the flanking maneuver before the CIC does. The lead pilot drops to 400 feet and moves to position himself between the flanking element and the tanker, activating the AN/ALQ210 electronic support suite and the laser designator simultaneously. At 400 feet, at night, over a body of water that has been transformed by 13 days of war into something that does not follow peacetime rules. This is not a low-risk choice. The lead pilot makes it without hesitation and without comment, because the alternative is allowing 4 fast attack craft to reach the tanker's starboard beam from an aspect angle the destroyer cannot cover in time. At 11:58 p.m., the lead fast attack craft on the direct approach closes to 9 nautical miles and launches. The weapon is a C-802 anti-ship missile, a sea-skimming active radar homing system that crosses the water's surface at subsonic speed and an altitude of 5 to 7 meters, low enough that it spends most of its flight invisible to radar systems looking from above. The destroyer's SPY-1D picks it up at 7 nautical miles, the radar struggling to separate the missile's return from the surface clutter generated by the Gulf's irregular wave pattern and the thermal distortion off the burning cargo terminal to the northwest. The track is tentative for 1.4 seconds. 1.4 seconds at this range is a significant margin of error. The TAO designates the inbound track and initiates an SM2 engagement solution. The fire control system needs a solid track. The track firms at 11:58:34 p.m. The SM2 exits its VLS cell at 11:58:37 p.m. 3 seconds from detection quality to launch, a number that will appear in the after-action report as adequate and will feel, to everyone in the CIC during those 3 seconds, like an eternity. The SM-2 intercepts at 4.1 nautical miles. But the lead fast attack craft has already launched a second missile, and the radar picture now shows a third launch from the flanking element to the northeast, the Seahawk's laser designator feeding the CIC a real-time picture of the moment the flanking craft's launch rails fire. 3 anti-ship missiles are now inbound from 2 different vectors. The destroyer's fire control system is managing both threat axes simultaneously, and the VLS cells are firing in a sequence that the weapons officer is tracking on her display with the focused intensity of someone who has memorized the magazine layout and is spending rounds the way a skilled player spends chips, deliberately accounting for what comes next. Second SM-2 away. Third SM-2 away. The second intercept is clean. The third, the missile from the flanking element, is not. The fire control radar loses the track for 0.8 seconds when the Seahawk maneuvers through the engagement geometry, its own radar return briefly masking the target. The SM-2 passes within lethal proximity but does not achieve a fuse solution. The missile continues. At 11:59 p.m., the CIWS on the tanker's starboard side engages. The system has been tracking the inbound round since it crossed 5 nautical miles. The 20mm rotary cannon fires. The burst catches the missile at 1.2 nautical miles. The detonation sends a water column 30 feet into the air, 900 meters off the tanker's starboard bow. Fragments, small, fast, indifferent, impact the tanker's hull plating above the waterline. The structural assessment conducted 6 minutes later by the tanker's chief officer will find minor impact damage to 2 hull plates and a ruptured navigation light housing. No penetration, no fire, no casualties. The tanker crew and the internal muster station will not learn this for 11 minutes. They will spend those 11 minutes in a sealed compartment below the waterline, listening to sounds they cannot identify, in a silence that is not peaceful but loaded. The particular silence of people who are doing the only thing they can do, which is nothing, and doing it with all the concentration they possess. At 12:01 a.m., the fast attack craft cross into the defensive engagement zone of the destroyer's surface guns. The 5-inch mount had been waiting. The commanding officer issues the engagement order. The first round fires at 12:01 and 12 seconds a.m. The 5-inch gun, cycling at its maximum rate of fire, produces a sound and a concussion that the bridge crew feels in their sternums, a physical punctuation to an engagement that has until this moment been conducted primarily in the language of electronics and radar returns. The lead craft in the direct approach element takes a hit on its bow section at 12:01:31 a.m. It does not immediately incapacitate. The craft continues forward at reduced speed, trailing smoke, its bow low in the water. A second round impacts amidships. At 12:01:48 a.m., the craft's forward momentum stops. It begins to turn. It is not withdrawing. It is losing steerage. The remaining 3 craft in the direct approach element do not stop. They accelerate. The closing speed is now 46 knots, and the range is dropping through 5 nautical miles. The 5-inch gun shifts target. The CIC is calling contact solutions faster than the mount can traverse. 2 craft are fired upon simultaneously, the gun prioritizing the closest, and one takes a hit that produces a secondary detonation in its fuel system that the FLIR camera captures as a sudden bright bloom that then contracts into a burning shape on the water. The 3rd craft in the element jinks right and uses the burning debris of its partner as a masking screen, a maneuver that takes it out of the gun's direct fire solution for 11 seconds and uses those 11 seconds to close to 3.2 nautical miles. At 3.2 nautical miles, the CIWS on the destroyer engages. The fast attack craft at this range is moving at 46 knots, and the 20mm system is tracking it with the mechanical patience of a system that does not experience urgency. The burst fires at 2.9 nautical miles. The craft takes impacts across its forward section. Its speed drops. At 2.2 nautical miles, it stops. It is not destroyed. It is incapacitated, engines disabled, hull damaged, crew status unknown. It sits on the water and burns with a low orange fire that the thermal camera will continue to paint for the next 40 minutes. The flanking element has been engaged throughout this sequence by the Seahawk and by ESSM rounds fired from the destroyer's forward launcher. 2 of the 4 flanking craft have been incapacitated. 1 has turned back toward Abu Musa Island at reduced speed, trailing oil. The fourth has gone quiet. Not slow, not damaged. Quiet. Its radar return has dropped to a level consistent with a craft running at low speed on electric propulsion, minimizing its acoustic and electromagnetic signature. The Seahawk loses visual at 12:03 a.m. when the craft moves into the thermal shadow cast by the tanker's hull. This is the desperation move. The 4th craft has not withdrawn. It is repositioned. It is now 800 meters off the tanker's port quarter, the side away from the destroyer, the side the engagement geometry had uncovered when the destroyer moved to engage the flanking element. At 12:04:22 a.m., the craft's crew fires 2 short-range unguided rockets toward the tanker's bridge structure. The rockets are inaccurate. One passes over the tanker's funnel and detonates in the water 60 meters beyond. The second impacts the tanker's port accommodation block at the 4th deck level, a steel structure designed for crew habitability, not ballistic protection. The detonation blows out 2 cabin windows and ruptures a fresh water tank. No one is in the accommodation block. The tanker crew is still in the internal muster station, still in the sealed compartment below the waterline, still listening to sounds they cannot identify. The Seahawk, repositioning from the northeastern engagement, reacquires the 4th craft on infrared at 12:04:31 a.m. The lead pilot calls the contact and bearing to the CIC. The CIC already has it, the destroyer's port side. CIWS has been tracking the contact since it emerged from the tanker's thermal shadow 9 seconds ago. The CIWS fires at 12:04:38 a.m. The craft is at 650 meters. The 20-millimeter burst catches it broadside. The craft's fuel cell ignites. At 12:04:41 a.m., the 4th craft of the flanking element is no longer a factor. At 12:06 a.m., the tactical picture in the CIC shows 0 active inbound threats. The CO conducts a force-wide status check. The destroyer has expended 2 SM-2s, 3 ESSM rounds, and 140 rounds of 5-inch ammunition. The tanker has minor hull damage above the waterline and a destroyed accommodation section at the port 4th deck. The Seahawk has been airborne for 5 hours and 40 minutes and is 30 minutes from bingo fuel. The lead pilot requests permission to proceed to the tanker deck for an emergency refuel. Permission is granted. Of the 8 fast attack craft that began the intercept run at 11:44 p.m., 2 have been incapacitated and are dead in the water. 1 is burning and drifting. 4 have withdrawn toward Abu Musa Island. 1, the craft that absorbed the initial 5-inch hits, is still afloat, still transmitting, its location logged in the tactical picture as a passive contact that the strike group's operations staff will forward to the regional maritime patrol network for monitoring. The commanding officer stands at the bridge windows and watches the Seahawk approach the tanker for its emergency deck landing. The tanker's deck crew has come up from the internal muster stations and is preparing the landing spot in the dark, flashlights moving across the helideck in a pattern that looks, from the bridge of the destroyer 800 meters away, like a code being transmitted in a language made entirely of light and controlled urgency. The CO watches them work. He's been awake for 21 hours. He will not sleep tonight. The Strait of Hormuz is still 140 nautical miles away, and the IRGCN's remaining assets in the Gulf number, by the last intelligence estimate, more than 40 fast attack craft. The tanker crew will complete the transit in another 9 hours. They will not know, for most of that transit, precisely what happened tonight, because the CO of the destroyer has determined that the information will not improve their ability to do their jobs and may diminish it. What they know is that they are still moving. What they know is that the Escort is still with them. In maritime law and in the practice of convoy escort as old as the age of sail, those 2 facts are the entire substance of the guarantee. At 12:14 a.m., the Seahawk touches down on the tanker's helideck. The lead pilot releases the collective, and the aircraft settles onto the deck with a solidity that he will later describe in the mandatory post-flight debrief as normal. The aircrewman unbuckles his harness and sits for 3 seconds without moving. He's been awake for 18 hours. He has spent most of those hours in the dark, over contested water, making targeting calls that will appear in the operational log as coordinates and bearing data. 3 seconds of not moving. Then he opens the door, steps out onto a deck that smells of exhaust and salt and someone else's oil cargo, and begins the pre-refuel checklist, because the Strait of Hormuz is still 140 nautical miles away, and the night is not finished with any of them. 8 IRGCN craft, 41 minutes of engagement. 3 craft incapacitated, 1 disabled, 4 withdrawn. 2.1 million barrels still moving southeast. 0 crew fatalities. 0 inches yielded. The Persian Gulf has been a corridor of commerce for 5,000 years because someone has always been willing to stand in it and hold the line. Tonight that someone wore khaki and drove an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer at flank speed through a swarm designed to break them. The corridor holds because the people inside it refuse to let it close. The tanker moves south through the dark water. The Escort moves with it. The burning wreckage behind them does not move at all.